Available balance, $0. That number glowed on the computer screen like a curse. For a long moment, Margaret Hollis didn't breathe. The ticking clock in her kitchen froze, the sound of the city outside vanished, and all that remained was the slow, heavy pulse in her chest. She refreshed the page once, then again, still 0. Her hands, browned and lined by years of scrubbing other people's floors, hovered above the keyboard. There had to be a mistake. Maybe the system glitched. Maybe she clicked the wrong account. She clicked View Transactions. 4 wire transfers, same recipient name, same total, $82,000. Her savings. Every cent she had earned cleaning houses across Los Angeles, the money she had planned to survive on when her knees gave out and her heart couldn't take another 12-hour shift. Gone. Her throat closed. She picked up the phone, dialed the number on the back of her debit card, and waded through the endless recorded message. When the human voice finally came, it was flat, polite, robotic. "Yes, ma'am, the funds were transferred online over the last 2 days." "To whom?" Maggie whispered. "To an account under the name Ethan Hollis." The room tilted. "Hair son." For a second she thought she'd misheard. Ethan, her only child. The boy she raised alone after his father disappeared with a woman from Las Vegas. The boy she carried through hunger, through sickness, through every storm life threw at her. The air went out of her lungs, the phone slipped from her hand. Across the room, the old refrigerator buzzed, the ceiling fan groaned. Life went on, but Maggie didn't. She sat frozen, eyes locked on the dim computer screen. Available balance, $0. It wasn't the money that broke her. It was the realization that her son hadn't even left a note. The old landline rang, loud and shrill. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Maggie girl, you seen your Ethan's Instagram?" It was Carol Jennings, her neighbor, voice bursting with gossip and pity. "He's in New York, baby. Big dinner, skyline view him, that wife of his, and her mama. They look like movie stars." Maggie's stomach turned cold. "New York?" "Yes, and you should see the caption. New York, my new beginning. I deserve this." Carol giggled. "Lord, they live in large." The phone line went dead. Maggie had hung up. Her feet moved on their own. She walked to the small shelf near the hallway, the one lined with Ethan's photos. Him at 5, missing 2 teeth. Him at 15, holding his first basketball trophy. Him at 22, in his college graduation gown, smiling so wide she could almost hear his laugh. And now, at 34, smiling again but with someone else's love, someone else's money. She felt the tears rising, but they stopped halfway. They simply refused to fall. Instead, she let out a sound that was not a sob, but something quieter, darker, a breath of realization. She sat in her old armchair, the one she'd bought the year Ethan turned 7. She used to tell him, "One day, baby, Mama will buy a real couch, and you'll see." She never did. The chair was all she had, but it had always held her. On the table beside her sat a photo of her and Ethan at Disneyland. He was 10, grinning, cotton candy in hand. She remembered that day, the smell of sunscreen, the laughter, the promise he made while watching fireworks. "I'll make you proud, Mom." She stared at the picture until her eyes burned. Then, slowly, she reached for the red notebook resting under the lamp. It was filled with grocery lists, recipe notes, and fragments of prayers she'd written during lonely nights. She flipped to a blank page and began to write with her trembling hand. "My son didn't die, but the mother in me did." She set the pen down. The words looked too calm for the storm they carried. The house was quiet again. The only sound was the buzzing of a dying fluorescent light overhead. Outside, an ice cream truck passed, its cheerful song floating through the neighborhood, a cruel reminder that life was still moving. Maggie stood, walked to the sink, poured herself a cup of water, and whispered, "All right, Lord, if this is the lesson, I'll learn it." Her reflection in the kitchen window looked older than she remembered, tired, yes, but something else too, sharper. Far across the country, in a luxury suite overlooking Times Square, Ethan Hollis laughed as his wife, Vanessa, showed off a diamond bracelet. "You really think she'll notice?" Vanessa asked, sipping champagne. "She's old," Linda, the mother-in-law, said with a smirk. "People like her don't even know how online banking works." Ethan forced a smile. "It was just sitting there," he said. "She wasn't using it. But his laugh was hollow, his eyes unfocused. For a brief second, he saw his mother's hands again cracked from bleach, holding his lunchbox, telling him, "Hold on, baby, we'll eat tomorrow." He blinked, and the image was gone. Back in Los Angeles, Maggie turned off the computer. The room fell into darkness. She sat there for a moment, then whispered to the empty air, "So that's how it is." She stood, found her way to the stove, lit the gas, and made a cup of chamomile tea. The kettle whistled, echoing like a warning in the stillness. She carried the cup back to her chair, took one sip, and looked down at her red notebook again. She drew a small line under her previous sentence and wrote 3 more words. "This isn't over." Her handwriting was crooked, but her resolve was not. Maggie closed the notebook, her eyes fixed on the front door as if expecting someone or something to walk through. The street outside hummed faintly. A police siren in the distance, a dog barking 2 blocks away. Ordinary sounds, yet tonight everything felt charged, as if the air itself knew something had changed. She leaned back in her chair, whispering to herself, "If love can betray, then silence can protect." Her gaze drifted to the family photo on the wall, Ethan's face smiling from another lifetime. She smiled back. But this time, the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Carol," Maggie said, knocking on the neighbor's door early that morning. "You know numbers, right?" Carol Jennings, a retired accountant with sharp eyes and the kind of curiosity that could peel secrets from the air, looked surprised. "Numbers? Depends who's askin'. Why, Maggie, you look like you haven't slept a wink." "I haven't," Maggie replied, holding her red notebook to her chest. "I think someone's been stealing from me, my son." Carol's face fell. "Come in, honey." The smell of cinnamon and coffee filled Carol's kitchen. Bills, notebooks, and old tax folders covered her table like a battlefield of numbers. Maggie sat down, her hands trembling as she opened her notebook. "I checked my account yesterday," she began, her voice low but steady. $82,000, gone, all transferred to his name. Carol blinked hard. "Ethan? The one in New York?" "Yes." The neighbor let out a whistle and shook her head. "Lord have mercy. Families, huh?" Maggie's gaze dropped to her lap. "I raised him alone, cleaned houses in Beverly Hills, scrubbed marble floors until my hands bled. I never wanted much, Carol, just to be safe when I got old." Carol reached across the table, her voice softening. "We'll figure this out, but I need to see the details. Can you access your bank from your phone?" Maggie nodded, unlocking the screen with hesitant fingers. Carol took it, her eyes narrowing as she scrolled through the transaction list. "Here," she said. "These transfers, see that? That's not normal. Someone linked your account to another through what looks like a joint authorization. Did you ever sign anything like that?" Maggie frowned. "I can barely sign my name. I didn't sign a thing." "Then someone forged it," Carol said flatly. "And from the looks of it, they've been taking money for months, slow at first, then all at once." The room went silent. The only sound was the slow drip of coffee into a cracked mug. Maggie felt her pulse rise. So it wasn't just one mistake. Carol shook her head. "No mistake, honey, this was planned." Maggie looked out the window. The morning light fell across her wrinkled hands, and for the first time, she saw them not as a sign of weakness, but as proof of endurance. "What can I do?" she whispered. Carol hesitated, biting her lip. "You'll need someone who knows the law. You remember Henry Porter, that old lawyer who used to live across the street?" "Henry?" Maggie's eyes widened. "We haven't spoken in years." "Well, you might want to fix that," Carol said, scribbling a number on a napkin. "He's retired, but he still helps people now and then, especially when Justice's got gray hair." Maggie managed a tired smile. "Justice with gray hair," she repeated. "That's me." Later that afternoon, Maggie walked the few blocks to Henry Porter's house. His place looked like it had been frozen in time, books stacked in windows, the American flag faded from too much Sunday. When he opened the door, his expression softened immediately. "Maggie Hollis. Now that's a name I didn't expect to hear." She smiled faintly. "Didn't expect to say it either." Inside, the smell of old paper and ink filled the air. Henry's desk was cluttered with open files and dusty law books, and yet he seemed completely at home among the chaos. "So," he said, pouring 2 cups of coffee, "tell me why a woman like you comes knocking on a washed-up lawyer's door." She told him everything. The drained account, the forged name, her son's trip to New York, the silence afterward. Henry listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned back, his jaw tightening. "Elder financial abuse," he said finally. "That's what this is, Maggie, and it's a damn crime." "I'm not looking to ruin him," she said softly. "I just want to understand why." "Why?" Henry repeated. "Because greed doesn't come with a conscience. Because some people confuse kindness for weakness. But listen to me carefully, you can't fight this with tears, you fight it with proof." He pulled an old file box from the shelf and set it on the table. "We'll start by collecting every statement, every signature, every transfer record. Once we have that, we'll build a case." Maggie exhaled slowly. "A case against my own son." Henry looked at her over his glasses. "You're not suing a boy, you're standing up to a man who forgot who raised him." The words hit hard, but true. He handed her a small voice recorder. "And another thing, if anyone calls you about money bankers, agents, even your son, you record it. Every word." Maggie nodded, her fingers curling around the device. As she stood to leave, Henry placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know what I've learned after 40 years in the courtroom? The law doesn't always protect the loudest person. It protects the one who doesn't give up." That night, Maggie sat alone in her living room. The city hummed outside, sirens, dogs barking, a distant bus engine. Life moved on as if nothing had changed. She turned on the small lamp beside her chair and opened her red notebook again. Under her last note, she wrote, "Step 2. Collect proof." Quietly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Ethan, hey Mom, you okay? Just checking in." She stared at the screen, her hand trembling. The audacity of that message. The simplicity of his words after what he'd done. "Maggie, I'm fine. How's New York?" A few seconds later, he replied with a picture him and Vanessa in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, smiling. "Ethan, beautiful. You'd love it here." She wanted to scream, but instead, she typed back, "Maggie, maybe someday." Then she set the phone down, her heart steady. "Let him think I'm blind," she thought. "He won't see me coming." Days passed. Maggie met with Carol every morning, learning how to navigate online banking, how to read statements, how to trace transactions. "You see this code here?" Carol explained one afternoon. "That's an IP address. It shows where the transfer came from, and guess what? It's all the same device, his." Maggie leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. "So he did it himself, no one else." "Looks like it," Carol confirmed. "That's your smoking gun." They printed everything, organizing it in folders Carol labeled Evidence, Theft. When Maggie brought the folders to Henry, he flipped through the papers with quiet satisfaction. "You're a fast learner." "I've been underestimated all my life," she replied. Henry smirked. "Good. Keep it that way, let them think you're harmless." He took one document, studied the forged signature, and frowned. "This is crude. Whoever did this didn't even bother to practice. See how your M loops inward here? Theirs doesn't. Sloppy." He looked up. "You know what that means, right?" Maggie nodded. "He didn't just take my money, he signed my death." That evening, as she walked home, the streetlights flickered on one by one, painting the cracked sidewalks in patches of gold. She passed the corner store, the church, the playground where she used to push Ethan on the swings. Each place whispered memories that no longer felt like hers. When she reached her house, she noticed the mailbox flag was up. Inside was a plain white envelope with no return address. She opened it. Inside was a printed document, Last Will and Testament of Maggie Hollis. Her eyes widened. It stated that all her assets, including her home, were to go to Ethan Hollis upon her death. At the bottom was a signature. Her signature. Except it wasn't hers. Her hand went numb. The paper trembled as she turned it over. Someone had tried to file this. She rushed inside, placed the document on the kitchen table, and dialed Henry. He answered on the second ring. "Henry, it's me. They forged my will." His voice hardened. "Don't move anything, I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived, he examined the document under the lamplight, shaking his head. "This isn't just theft, Maggie. This is attempted property fraud. If they'd filed this properly, you could have lost your house without ever knowing." Maggie's voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "So he tried to erase me while I'm still alive." Henry said nothing. She sat down, folded her hands, and stared at the document. He killed me on paper. Henry's silence was heavy. After a long pause, he said, "We're going to stop this, Maggie. But you need to understand, this will get ugly. If we expose him, it could ruin him." "Then so be it," she whispered. "He already ruined me." Henry looked at her closely. "What are you planning to do?" She smiled faintly. "Something I should have done years ago. Stop protecting him." The next morning, Maggie went to the courthouse with Henry. They filed a preliminary report under the Elder Protection and Financial Safety Act, marking Ethan Hollis as a suspect. It wasn't a lawsuit yet, just a safeguard that froze all associated assets. It took hours. Signatures, verifications, questions. But by the end of the day, it was done. Her account, her house, her future secured. When they stepped out into the sunlight, Henry turned to her. "It's just a first crack in the glass, Maggie. The whole window hasn't shattered yet." She looked up at the blue sky. "Then we'll keep hitting it until it does." That night, she cooked herself a small meal, collard greens and cornbread, just like she used to make for Ethan when money was tight. She ate in silence, the red notebook open beside her plate. Under her last note, she wrote, "Step 3, bury him but alive." Then, after a long pause, she added, "With truth." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly over the city. Rain began to fall, tapping against the window pane like quiet applause. Maggie smiled. "About time the sky cried for me." The morning after the anonymous message, Maggie woke up with a pain deep in her bones, one that no sleep could ease. Her joints ached like rusted hinges, her breath came shorter than usual. She thought it was just age, the weight of stress pressing on her ribs. But when she coughed, a thin streak of red marked her tissue. She stared at it for a moment. "Great," she muttered. "Now even my body's turning against me." Outside, Los Angeles was waking up, sirens in the distance, car horns, the smell of smog mixed with coffee from the corner store. It was a city that didn't stop for anyone's pain. Maggie had learned that long ago. She made tea, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and headed to the community clinic. Dr. Evans was a tall, calm man in his 40s. He had been Maggie's doctor for years, through broken bones, exhaustion, and the quiet ailments that came from working too many decades. "Miss Hollis," he said kindly as she entered. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I've been busy," she replied. "Life doesn't slow down just because I do." He smiled gently. "That's what I like about you, you always fight. What brings you in today?" "I'm tired," she admitted, "but not the kind that goes away with rest." He listened, took her vitals, and frowned slightly. "You've lost weight, Maggie. When's the last time you had blood work done?" 2 years ago, maybe 3. "Let's do some tests," he said, scribbling notes. "Just routine, probably nothing serious." She nodded, but when she saw his eyes flicker with concern, she knew he was lying to comfort her. 2 days later, he called. "Maggie," his voice said through the line, heavy, hesitant. "I need you to come in." She felt her stomach tighten. "Can't you just tell me?" "No, I'd rather we talk face to face." That was never a good sign. At the clinic, she sat in the same chair she had used for years, staring at the same faded poster that said, "Health is wealth." The irony made her smile bitterly. Dr. Evans walked in with a file pressed to his chest. He didn't sit right away. Instead, he leaned against the counter, looking at her with quiet compassion. "I wish I had better news," he said. "We ran the tests twice to be sure." She waited. "You have leukemia, Maggie. It's aggressive." The room seemed to tilt, but she stayed perfectly still. "How long?" she asked. He hesitated. 6 months, maybe less. There are treatments, chemotherapy, transfusions, but they're hard and expensive. Maggie looked down at her hands. "I don't have that kind of money." He nodded sadly. "I can refer you to a foundation." She cut him off. "No, I don't want to die hooked up to machines. I've cleaned enough hospital floors to know how that story ends." "Maggie, I've lived through worse," she said quietly, "and I've got unfinished business." Dr. Evans sighed, realizing she wasn't a woman who needed pity. "At least let me give you something for the pain." She smiled faintly. "Save it for someone who's still fighting to live. I'm fighting for something else." That night, back home, she sat in the dark, the city lights flickering outside her window. She wasn't afraid. She had seen death before in the faces of the old women she cleaned for, in the cold silence after a funeral. But this time, death felt personal, intimate, like an uninvited guest who'd been standing at her door all along. She opened her red notebook and turned to a blank page. Her handwriting was shakier than before, but her resolve wasn't. 6 months to make things right, 6 months to die clean. She underlined the words twice. Then she called Henry. He arrived 20 minutes later, his coat unbuttoned, hair disheveled. What happened? You sound off. I went to the doctor, she said simply. It's leukemia, advanced. Henry froze. Maggie, don't say sorry, she interrupted. I've had a good run. Now I just want to leave with my dignity intact. He sank into the chair opposite her. What are you planning? She handed him the forged will. We already know they tried to erase me on paper. Now they'll learn what happens when a woman's got nothing left to lose. Henry looked at her, admiration and worry warring in his eyes. You're not afraid, are you? I don't have time to be, she said. I've got 6 months. Let's make every day count. He nodded slowly. All right. Then we do this the right way. No revenge, only justice. She smirked. Justice is the only kind of revenge that doesn't rot your soul. The next week was a blur of movement. Maggie, armed with Henry's guidance, filed a formal report of elder financial abuse with the district attorney's office. She submitted bank statements, the forged will, and even screenshots Carol had helped her retrieve. The young officer at the counter raised his eyebrows. You've done your homework, ma'am. Maggie smiled thinly. Old women have plenty of time to learn. When she left the courthouse, Henry was waiting outside, leaning against his car. They'll open a case within a week, he said. And once that happens, the bank has to freeze any linked accounts, including Ethan's. Good, she said. I want him to feel the kind of emptiness I saw on my screen. Henry looked at her carefully. You really think this will change him? No, she said softly, but it'll change me. Meanwhile, across the country, Ethan was unraveling. At first, it was just small things, his card getting declined at a restaurant, a payment bouncing back, Vanessa rolling her eyes when he couldn't pay for a new handbag. Then came the calls from the bank, the hold notices, the realization that his accounts were frozen. What the hell's happening? He yelled, slamming his phone on the table. Vanessa crossed her arms. Maybe you should have thought of that before dragging me into your family drama. My mother's behind this, he muttered. She must have reported it. Vanessa scoffed. Then fix it. You're the accountant, aren't you? Or do you only know how to steal from old women? He turned on her, anger burning behind his eyes. Watch your mouth. She laughed coldly. You're pathetic, Ethan. You can't even steal right. He stormed out, but her words followed him like ghosts. Back in Los Angeles, Maggie's strength began to fade. Some mornings she couldn't get out of bed. Her bones felt hollow, her body foreign, but she refused to stop. Carol visited often, bringing soup and soft laughter. You sure you don't want to tell Ethan you're sick? She asked one evening. Maggie stirred her tea. No, he lost the right to care. Carol hesitated. You're stronger than most people I know. I'm not strong, Maggie said. I'm just tired of being weak. They shared a quiet smile, the kind that said more than words ever could. Weeks passed. The investigation gained traction. Henry received updates. Ethan was officially under review for financial misconduct and identity fraud. Maggie's name was cleared. Her home, her account, her dignity, all protected by law. And yet, she felt no joy, only a strange emptiness, as though justice had come too late to fill the space love had left behind. One night, she opened her red notebook again. Under her last entry, she wrote, "Justice doesn't scream, it watches." Then, as if answering her, the phone rang. It was Dr. Evans. "Maggie," he said softly, "your latest results came back worse than expected. The disease is progressing faster than we thought." "How much time?" He hesitated. 3 months. Maybe 4. She closed her eyes. Then I'd better hurry. 2 days later, she met Henry at his office. "I want to make sure everything's set when I'm gone," she said. He frowned. "Don't talk like that. Henry, please. If I die before this is over, I need to know my name stays clean. I want no loose ends, not one." He studied her face, the sharp cheekbones, the tired eyes, the calm determination. "You remind me of my mother," he said quietly. "She fought till her last breath." Maggie smiled faintly. "Maybe we'd have gotten along. Henry opened a new file and started writing. Then let's make your exit a legal masterpiece. Meanwhile, Ethan received an email that made his stomach drop. Subject: pending investigation notice, elder financial abuse. He read it 3 times. Panic crawled up his spine. What is this? He muttered, scrolling through the attached documents, screenshots, statements, signatures. His mother's name, his name. Everything laid bare. Vanessa walked in, sipping coffee. What now? She filed charges, he said, voice shaking. Then you're screwed, she replied flatly. I told you she wasn't as dumb as she looked. He turned to her, furious. We can fight this. She's dying. No one will believe her. Vanessa smirked. You sure about that? Because if she's dying, people love a victim. He glared. You don't understand. If they find out I forged those documents, I could go to prison. She shrugged. Guess you should have thought of that before marrying up, huh? In Los Angeles, Maggie received another message. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was from Ethan. Ethan, Mom, what are you doing? The bank froze everything. I can't pay rent. Vanessa's losing it. Please, just tell them it was a misunderstanding. She read the message twice, then put down the phone without replying. The kettle whistled on the stove. She poured herself tea, the same way she had every night for decades. When the phone buzzed again, she ignored it. Ethan. Please, Mom, I'm begging you. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she whispered to herself, now you know what it feels like to beg for something that should have been yours. Later that night, she dreamed. She was young again, holding Ethan's hand as they crossed the street after school. He was smiling, clutching a paper with a gold star on it. I did it, Mama. I got an A. She bent down and hugged him. I knew you would, baby. Then the image shifted, the boy faded, replaced by the man in New York, holding someone else's hand. She woke up gasping, the red notebook still on her lap. The courtroom smelled of varnished wood and stale air conditioning, the scent of truth, fear, and too many broken promises. Margaret Maggie Hollis sat at the plaintiff's table, her scarf folded neatly over her lap, her red notebook tucked inside her purse like a secret weapon. Across from her, Ethan sat beside his attorney, a sleek man in a navy suit who spoke like someone used to twisting the truth until it sounded polite. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Maggie's body trembled, but not from weakness. She was learning that silence, real silence, could be louder than any scream. 3 weeks had passed since the day she'd been served the counterclaim. Ethan had accused her of defamation and financial misrepresentation, claiming she'd fabricated evidence to destroy his reputation. The accusation was cruel, absurd, and strategic. Classic move, Henry had said when he'd first read the papers. He's not trying to win, he's trying to scare you into backing off. Well, Maggie had replied, her tone calm but razor-edged. Then he's about to learn that fear runs both ways. So she played his game quietly. She attended every meeting, gathered more documents, stayed patient while Henry built the case piece by piece. And every night, she wrote in her notebook, Step 5, say nothing. Let the truth make the noise. Now, under the fluorescent lights of the Los Angeles Superior Court, Maggie looked at her son for the first time in months. He looked older, thinner, exhausted, but his eyes still carried the same arrogance, that quiet belief that charm could erase sin. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away. The clerk read the allegations, her voice echoing through the room. Maggie barely heard the words. She was studying Ethan, how he shifted in his seat, how his jaw tightened when the forged documents were displayed on the projector. Miss Hollis, the judge said, pulling her from her thoughts. Do you have legal representation present? Henry rose. Your Honor, I am representing Miss Hollis. We move to dismiss the counterclaim on grounds of false representation and retaliatory intent. The defense attorney smirked. Objection, Your Honor. The plaintiff's accusations have publicly damaged my client's standing and career prospects. Henry cut him off. Your client forged his mother's signature, drained her account, and attempted to register a falsified will. If he's worried about reputation, he should have thought about that before stealing $82,000. A low murmur spread through the courtroom. The judge tapped her pen. Order. Ethan's lawyer turned to Maggie. Mrs. Hollis, isn't it true that you voluntarily gave your son access to your financial accounts years ago? I gave him trust, Maggie said softly, her voice steady. not permission to betray it. A pause. Even the judge's expression softened. The lawyer pressed on, his tone condescending. "So you claim that this signature," he pointed to a document projected on the screen, "was forged?" Maggie looked at it without blinking. "That's not my hand. I may be old, but my M has a loop. That one's broken, just like the person who wrote it." The courtroom went silent again. Henry almost smiled. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself." The judge nodded. "Motion to dismiss will be reviewed after recess." During the break, Maggie and Henry sat in the hallway outside. She sipped from a paper cup of water, her fingers trembling slightly. "You all right?" Henry asked. "I'm tired," she admitted, "but not done." He looked at her with admiration. "You know, most people your age would have let it go." She smiled faintly. "I stopped being most people the day my son emptied my account." They shared a quiet laugh, a fragile moment of peace before the next storm. Meanwhile, in a dim hotel room across town, Ethan paced the floor. Vanessa had left him 2 days ago, taking what little remained of their savings. He poured himself a drink, cheap whiskey from a plastic bottle, and stared at the city lights through the dirty window. His phone buzzed. A text from his lawyer. "We might lose. She has every document." Ethan hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud. "God damn it." He sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. For the first time, he let himself feel the weight of what he'd done, not just the theft, but the betrayal. He thought about his mother's house, the smell of bleach and warm bread, the sound of her humming when she cooked. He remembered how she used to kiss his forehead before school and whisper, "Do right," even when nobody's watching. Now, she was watching. From across the courtroom, from inside his conscience, from every corner of the life he'd tried to build on lies. Back at Maggie's home, the neighbors had started visiting more often. They brought casseroles, flowers, even small notes of encouragement. To them, she had become something more than a victim. She was a symbol. "You've got people talking about elder rights now," Carol told her one evening, flipping through a local newspaper. "They even mentioned your case in the community bulletin." Maggie chuckled. About time the world listened to old women for something other than recipes. But even as she smiled, a shadow crossed her face. Her illness was advancing faster than she admitted. Some nights she couldn't breathe without stopping to rest halfway through a sentence. Henry noticed. "You need to slow down, Maggie." "I can rest when the truth's done its job," she replied. A week later, the judge issued her decision. Ethan's counterclaim was dismissed. Maggie had won the first round. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but she said nothing. She simply held her red notebook to her chest and walked past them like a queen through noise. When one journalist finally asked, "Mrs. Hollis, what message do you have for your son?" she stopped just long enough to reply, "Silence doesn't mean surrender. It means I've already said everything worth hearing." The video went viral that night. Within 24 hours, number Justice for Maggie trended across social media. Strangers flooded her messages with support letters, donations, prayers. Some called her the mother who fought back. She didn't care for fame, but she did care that Ethan would see it. And he did. Sitting in a cafe, staring at his phone, Ethan watched the video replay again and again. His mother's calm face, her steady voice. No anger, no hatred, just truth. He threw the phone down, fighting tears he didn't want to shed. What have I done? But guilt wasn't enough to stop the storm he'd started. Later that night, his lawyer called. "The DA's office is reviewing your case, Ethan. If they find cause, there'll be criminal charges. You need to prepare." "Criminal charges," his voice cracked. "Elder abuse, financial fraud, forgery. It's serious." He hung up without replying. For a long time he just sat there, the sounds of the cafe fading into nothing. His world was shrinking fast. Meanwhile, Maggie sat by her window, writing under the soft glow of a single lamp. Step 6, wait for silence to echo. She closed the notebook and leaned back in her chair, her breathing shallow but her eyes alive. A knock came at the door. Carol entered, holding a plate of apple pie. "You're all over the news, Maggie. People say you're a hero." Maggie smiled gently. "Heroes don't get tired this easy." Carol placed the plate down and hesitated. "You ever think he'll apologize?" "Maybe," Maggie said softly. "But I won't be here to hear it." Carol's smile faded. "Don't say that." "It's not goodbye," Maggie replied. "It's the truth." Days turned into weeks. The city's chatter faded, replaced by legal motions and waiting. Maggie's health declined, but she refused hospital care. "I won't spend my last days in a gown that opens in the back," she told Henry with a grin. He tried to hide his worry. "At least let me bring you oxygen, Maggie." She shook her head. "You can't breathe for me, Henry. You've already done enough." One afternoon, Henry brought new documents and update from the district attorney's office. "They're freezing the remaining funds and opening a federal investigation," he said. "The feds are involved now. Ethan's officially on record." Maggie nodded, a faint spark lighting her eyes. So the silence worked after all. Henry exhaled. "You always knew it would." That night, rain began to fall again, heavy, relentless. Maggie sat by the window, watching the drops race down the glass like tiny messengers of time. She felt her pulse slowing, but her spirit sharpening. Her notebook lay open beside her. She picked up her pen and wrote one more line. "The game ends when they hear what silence was saying all along." Then, she heard a sound that froze her blood, a car pulling up outside, its engines still running. Through the rain-blurred window, she saw a shadow step out, tall, hesitant, familiar. Ethan. Her heart thudded once, hard. He stood on the porch, drenched, unsure. For a moment, she thought of not opening the door, but then she saw his face, pale, desperate, no arrogance left. When she opened the door, he looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Mom," he whispered. She said nothing. He stepped closer. "Please, I don't know what to do anymore." Maggie's eyes filled, but her voice was calm. "You start by telling the truth." "I can't fix it," he said, his voice breaking. "Everything's gone. Vanessa left. They're going to arrest me." She nodded slowly. "Then let the truth be your cellmate." He flinched. "You really hate me that much?" Her face softened. "I don't hate you, Ethan. I just stopped protecting you." For a moment, he looked like that little boy again, lost, ashamed, small. He turned to leave, then stopped. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She didn't answer. He walked away into the rain. The night Henry told her about the life insurance policy, Maggie didn't sleep. The rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled somewhere beyond the city, rumbling like a warning. She sat in her armchair, her red notebook open on her lap. The words on the last page, "The game isn't over yet," stared back at her like a prophecy. A life insurance policy in her name. Filed a week ago, naming Ethan as the sole beneficiary. Her son wasn't just desperate anymore, he was dangerous. The next morning, Henry arrived with a stack of papers. His tired eyes said more than words could. "It's legit," he said, setting them down on her kitchen table. "Filed through a third-party broker in New York. Someone used your personal information and medical data to approve it." Maggie frowned. "My medical data?" "Yeah," Henry said, flipping through the documents. "The diagnosis leukemia is in the application. That means someone accessed your hospital records." "Ethan," she whispered. "Maybe," Henry said carefully. "But it could also be Vanessa or her mother. Either way, it's fraud, and they're planning something." Maggie's hands tightened around her cup of tea. "What kind of something?" Henry met her eyes. "You don't need to guess, Maggie, you already know." The silence between them was cold and sharp. He finally said it. "If you die soon, that policy pays out $500,000. Her breath caught. $500,000. Straight into Ethan's name. That afternoon, she sat alone at her window, watching the rain return. She thought of all the ways betrayal could evolve, from carelessness to greed to cruelty, and now this, murder on paper. For the first time in her life, Maggie felt something close to fear. Not of death, but of dying before she finished what she started. She called Carol. "I need a favor," she said. "Name it." "I need you to come over. Bring your laptop." An hour later, Carol sat at Maggie's table, scrolling through online records with a cigarette dangling between her fingers. "I ran the broker's name," Carol said. "He's connected to a company called FinEdge Group out of New York. But that's not all. The person who signed as your representative used an email address registered under your son's old firm, Hollis and Grant Financial." Maggie's stomach turned. "He used his own company?" "Yeah," Carol said. "Arrogant or stupid, maybe both." Maggie leaned back in her chair. "So he's betting on my death." Carol nodded. "Looks that way." Maggie's eyes hardened. "Then we'll make sure he lives long enough to regret it." Henry helped her file another report with the federal investigators. The process was long, exhausting hours of questions, signatures, and explanations. When they were done, Henry looked at her across the desk. "You realize this could trigger a criminal indictment, Maggie. Fraud, forgery, and now life insurance fraud. That's prison time." "I don't want him in prison," she said. "I want him awake, living every day knowing the woman he betrayed didn't stay buried." Henry nodded. "Then we'll make sure that's how it ends." Meanwhile, across the country in New York, Ethan sat in a cheap motel room, flipping through overdue bills. He hadn't shaved in days. His hair was greasy, his eyes hollow. Vanessa was gone. Rhonda, her mother, hadn't returned his calls. When his phone buzzed, he jumped an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Hollis?" a voice said, professional, smooth, detached. "This is Agent Ramirez with the Department of Financial Crimes. I'm calling regarding an active investigation involving a life insurance policy in your mother's name." Ethan's blood went cold. "Woo, what about it?" "We'd like to schedule an interview. You've been listed as the primary beneficiary. There are irregularities we need to discuss." He swallowed hard. I didn't file anything." "We'll verify that," the agent said. "But I'd advise you to cooperate. It's always better to talk before we come looking." The line went dead. Ethan stared at the phone, his pulse pounding in his ears. He could barely breathe. Jesus, what have I done? In Los Angeles, Maggie was waiting for the next move. She didn't expect it to come so soon. That evening, as she was knitting by the window, her landline rang. She almost didn't answer, but something told her she should. "Hello? Maggie," a low voice said. She froze. "Ethan?" Silence, then a trembling breath. "Mom, I need help." Her stomach tightened. "Help? I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was stupid. I was desperate." His voice cracked. "But they used me, Mom. Vanessa and her mother, they made me sign papers. They said it was just insurance, that it'd cover your medical costs if something happened." "And you believed that?" "I did," he whispered. "Until they disappeared with everything. The bank accounts, the jewelry, even my ID. I don't know where they are." Maggie's voice was cold. "You stole my life, Ethan. Did you think you could just give it back and start over?" "I know," he said, sobbing now. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But please, they're dangerous, Mom. If they filed that policy, they might come for you next." She was silent. "Mama, please, just be careful. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know." The call disconnected before she could reply. For a long time, Maggie just sat there, her hand gripping the receiver, her heart beating slow but heavy. The fear she'd felt earlier turned to ice. They might come for you next. Henry came by the next morning. She told him everything. He frowned deeply. "You think he's lying?" "I think he's scared," she said, "and scared men don't lie well." Henry rubbed his temples. "If Vanessa and her mother are involved, this just got uglier. We're talking organized fraud, maybe even conspiracy." "Then it's time to stop being quiet," Maggie said. He looked up. "You mean?" "Yes," she said firmly. "We take this public." That week, Henry arranged for an interview with the Los Angeles Sentinel. The reporter, a young woman named Lacey Monroe, sat across from Maggie with a voice recorder. "Miss Hollis, your story has touched a lot of people," Lacey said, "but what you're telling me now that there's a new insurance scam, that's big. Are you ready for what happens if this goes public?" Maggie met her eyes. "I've already been erased once on paper. I've got nothing left to lose." Lacey nodded. "Then let's make sure everyone hears you." The article was published 2 days later. "Elder Woman Outsmarts Family Fraud, The Silent Fight of Margaret Hollis." It spread across social media like wildfire. Within 48 hours, television outlets picked it up. The story wasn't just about stolen money anymore, it was about survival, truth, and the dignity of a woman the world had written off as powerless. But not everyone was cheering. That same night, Maggie received a voicemail, no words, just breathing. Long, slow, deliberate breathing. Then a whisper. "You should have stayed quiet." Henry called the police, but there wasn't much they could do. "Could be a prank," the officer said, "or could be real. Keep your doors locked." Maggie nodded, but deep down, she already knew this wasn't a prank. She stayed awake that night, her red notebook open beside her bed. On a new page, she wrote, "Step 7. When silence ends, truth must roar." Across the country, Ethan sat in a federal interview room. Two agents faced him, their expressions unreadable. "Mr. Hollis," one said, "we have records linking your IP address and your digital signature to the insurance application. Do you deny authorizing it?" Ethan shook his head weakly. "I didn't file it. I swear, I didn't. They used my computer, my company login." "They meaning your wife and her mother?" "Yes," he whispered. The agents exchanged glances. "Where are they now?" "I don't know. I think they're planning something." "Something like what?" Ethan hesitated. "Like, making sure my mother doesn't live long enough to testify." The room went cold. The agent closed his notebook. "Then, Mr. Hollis, I suggest you start telling us everything you know." Back in Los Angeles, Maggie's phone rang again. She hesitated before answering. "Hello? Miss Hollis?" a woman's voice said. "This is Detective Harper, LAPD. We just received a call from federal investigators in New York. They've arrested your son." Maggie closed her eyes. "On what charges?" "Financial fraud, forgery, and attempted insurance manipulation," the detective said. "He's cooperating. He says there's a bigger threat to your safety. We're sending a patrol to watch your home for a few nights, just in case." Maggie exhaled slowly. "Thank you, detective." When she hung up, her hands were shaking. For the first time, she realized she didn't have months anymore, she had days. The disease was closing in, her strength fading, but something inside her was burning brighter than ever. She went to her desk, opened the red notebook, and began to write her final plan. Hours later, the phone rang again. This time, she knew the voice. "Mom?" It was Ethan. He sounded broken, hoarse. "They're going to charge me, Mom, but I told them everything. I told them about the will, the money, the policy, all of it. I'm sorry." Maggie's throat tightened. "You should be." "I know," he said. I don't know how to make it right." "You don't," she said. "You just stop making it worse." There was a long silence on the line, then softly, "Mom, I wish I could see you again." She didn't answer. "I love you," he whispered. The words landed like a ghost. She said nothing. When the call ended, she sat in the quiet house, the phone still warm in her hand. Her heart was heavy not from anger, but from knowing that love could still ache even after trust was gone. Maggie Hollis never thought she'd see her name printed on so many legal documents in her lifetime: complaints, subpoenas, sworn statements, affidavits. Her signature had once been the mark of love. Now it was a weapon. The morning after Vanessa and Rhonda were arrested, Detective Harper called her into the precinct to give an official statement. Maggie had expected relief. Instead, she felt something else: unease. Because the officer's voice had sounded too calm when he said, "We found something else in their car. You'll need to see it yourself." The Los Angeles Police Department's witness room smelled of metal and coffee. The fluorescent light flickered above the long glass wall separating her from the observation chamber. Detective Harper entered holding a file thick with photos and papers. "Morning, Miss Hollis," she said softly. "How's your health?" "Temporary," Maggie said dryly. "Show me what you found." Harper opened the file. "During the arrest, we recovered a folder labeled Arizona Claim. Inside were multiple forged documents, birth certificates, medical records, even an identity card with your name, but not your face." Maggie frowned. "What do you mean?" Harper slid one of the photos across the table. A woman, thin, gray-haired, unfamiliar, stared back from a fake driver's license. The name read Margaret Hollis. "That other sense, this woman has been posing as you," Harper explained. "She filed a life insurance claim in Phoenix 3 weeks ago, claiming that you'd already passed away. The payout was supposed to go to a trust controlled by Vanessa's mother, Rhonda." Maggie's stomach turned. "They declared me dead?" "On paper, yes," Harper said grimly. "And the scary part? The claim almost cleared. If the federal freeze hadn't hit your name last week, the money would have been wired." Henry, seated beside Maggie, exhaled sharply. "So we're dealing with identity theft layered on top of fraud." Harper nodded. "And possibly a wider operation. We're seeing similar names pop up across other states: elderly victims with forged identities, fake medical files, insurance scams. Vanessa and Rhonda weren't working alone." "Who else?" Maggie asked. "That's what we're trying to find out." Harper paused. "The feds have requested your cooperation. You're a key witness now." Maggie leaned back, her bones aching, her breath shallow. She wasn't built for courtrooms and police rooms, she was built for endurance, but endurance had turned into purpose. She looked through the one-way glass. On the other side sat Vanessa, her hands cuffed, her once perfect hair tangled, eyes hollow. Rhonda sat beside her, silent and still as stone. For a long moment, Maggie said nothing. Then, quietly, "Can she see me?" Harper shook her head. "No, ma'am, it's one way." Maggie studied Vanessa's reflection. "Good," she murmured. "I'd rather my ghost haunt her than my face." The interrogation began. Maggie stayed in the witness room while Harper entered the other side. "Vanessa Grant," the detective said, sitting across from her, "you've been charged with financial fraud, identity theft, and attempted homicide by deception." Vanessa laughed a dry, broken sound. "You make it sound so dramatic." Harper's tone was steady. "You forged a dying woman's signature, filed a false death certificate, and created a fake identity to collect money off her name." Vanessa's smile faltered. "You don't understand. This wasn't my plan." "Then whose was it?" "Rhonda's," Vanessa whispered. "My mother's. She runs everything. I just followed orders." Rhonda shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Maggie watched, heart hammering. Mother and daughter just like me and Ethan, she thought bitterly. Different sins, same silence. Harper pressed on. "So your mother masterminded the operation?" Vanessa nodded slowly. She knew people who buy names, identities, medical data. She said dying old women were easy money. The words hit Maggie like a physical blow. Harper turned to Rhonda. "You want to confirm that?" Rhonda smiled faintly. "I confirm nothing. My lawyer will handle the rest." Harper stood. "Then your lawyer better be ready for federal prison." As the detectives escorted the women out, Maggie whispered to Henry. She said, "People who buy names. That means there's more." Henry nodded grimly. "And they're still out there." Later that afternoon, Harper took Maggie to a separate room for her statement. The walls were beige, the air too cold. A recorder sat on the table. "When you're ready, Miss Hollis," Harper said. Maggie began. She spoke of Ethan's betrayal, the forged will, the empty account, the threats, and the fake policy. She spoke with precision, never trembling, never crying. When she finished, Harper turned off the recorder. "You've just given the most powerful testimony I've heard in 20 years. You know that, right?" Maggie smiled faintly. "I'm not here to be powerful, detective. I'm here to be remembered." That night, Henry drove her home. The city lights slid across the windshield like fleeting ghosts. "You all right?" he asked softly. "I'm tired," she said. "But not done." He smiled. "You remind me of the women my father used to write about, tough as dust, kind as water." Maggie looked out the window. "Kindness isn't what saves you. It's the moment you stop apologizing for being alive." When they reached her house, Henry turned off the engine but didn't get out right away. "The feds want you in Phoenix next week to testify again. They've uncovered a larger fraud network based on those Arizona documents." "Phoenix," she whispered. "How poetic." "Can you travel?" he asked gently. She looked at her trembling hands. "Barely, but I'll crawl there if I have to." Over the next few days, the news exploded. Headlines read, "Elder fraud ring busted in Los Angeles. Mother and daughter arrested. The woman who refused to die, Maggie Hollis, exposes national scam." The world that once ignored her now wanted her story. But fame wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to make sure no one else disappeared behind forged paperwork. She worked with Henry to create a foundation, the Hollis Trust for Victims of Elder Fraud. "When I'm gone," she said, "let this be my inheritance." Henry smiled. "You're leaving more behind than money, Maggie. You're leaving a map for the lost." 3 days before her Phoenix testimony, Maggie collapsed. It happened in her kitchen, quiet as a sigh. One moment she was pouring tea, the next her body simply gave way. When she woke up, she was in a hospital bed, bright lights, soft beeping, the smell of antiseptic. Dr. Evans stood by her side. "Still fighting, I see," he said gently. "I don't know how to stop," she whispered. He sighed. "Maggie, your blood counts are low. You shouldn't travel." "I'm not missing that hearing," she said firmly. "They tried to kill me with paper. The least I can do is write the final line myself." Evans smiled sadly. "Then at least promise me you'll let someone go with you." "Henry," she said. "Always Henry." The day before the trip, Henry came by with plane tickets and a heavy heart. "You don't have to do this in person," he said. "The prosecutors can use your recorded statement." I want them to see my face, she replied. Fraud works because people forget the victims are real. He nodded. Then we go together. They arrived in Phoenix under a sky the color of old copper. The federal courthouse was tall, glassy, and cold. Inside, Maggie was led to a small witness room, the walls lined with mirrors, the lights too bright. Wait here, the marshal said. We'll call you when the judge is ready. Maggie sat at the table, clutching her red notebook. The silence felt different here, hollow, heavy, expectant. She opened the notebook to the first page and reread her earliest words. My son didn't die, but the mother in me did. She smiled faintly. How far those words have traveled, she thought. Then the door opened. Harper stepped in, looking uneasy. Maggie, we have a situation. What kind of situation? Ethan's been transferred from New York for questioning. He's in custody here, and the U.S. attorney wants to see if you're willing to face him just once. Maggie's breath caught. Face him? Harper nodded. They think it might help close the case. He's finally talking. For a long moment, Maggie said nothing. Then she closed the notebook and stood, her knees trembling but her voice strong. Let's finish it. They brought her into another room, small, dim, divided by a pane of reinforced glass. Ethan sat on the other side, in an orange jumpsuit, his face pale and sunken. When he saw her, his eyes filled with something like shame and relief. Mom, he whispered. Maggie sat down, hands folded neatly. Ethan, I told them everything, he said. About Vanessa, Rhonda, the people who bought the names. They're going after them now. I wanted you to know. She studied him quietly. Why now? He swallowed hard. Because I couldn't sleep anymore. You stole my life, she said evenly. And now you're trading guilt for mercy. Tears welled in his eyes. I just wanted to fix it. You can't fix a soul by patching paper, she said softly. But you can start by owning it. Ethan nodded, weeping silently. I'm sorry. For the first time, she believed him. I forgive you, she said, but forgiveness isn't freedom. It's a sentence you serve inside yourself. The next morning, Phoenix was a furnace-hot wind scraping the sky, the kind of dry heat that seemed to whisper, don't breathe too long. Maggie Hollis sat in the federal witness transport van, her hands folded neatly over her red notebook. Henry sat beside her, watching the desert roll by through tinted windows. On his phone, the news replayed in a loop. FBI raid in Nevada, uncovers massive identity, fraud database, dozens of active profiles, believed to belong to living victims. One of those names was hers. Not Margaret Hollis, deceased, but Margaret Hollis, alive and under surveillance. She stared at the screen as if it were a mirror from another world. They're still using me, she murmured. Even now. Henry's voice was gentle but tight. We'll stop them. Harper says the files lead to a man named Victor Rains, a financial broker out of Reno. He's suspected of running the entire network. Vanessa and her mother were just collectors. Collectors? She repeated bitterly. So that's what people like us are to them, collectibles? Henry didn't answer. The van turned north toward Nevada, toward whatever truth still hid behind her stolen name. At the Reno field office, Special Agent Ramirez, the same voice Ethan had spoken to over the phone, met them with a grim smile. Miss Hollis, it's good to finally meet you. You've been at the center of something much bigger than Los Angeles. He laid a folder on the table. The database we recovered in the raid contained over 400 identities, mostly elderly women, all with terminal illnesses. Your profile was among the most frequently accessed. Maggie's hands tightened. Accessed by who? Ramirez flipped a page. We traced multiple logins to an IP address registered to FinEdge Holdings, a shell corporation owned by Victor Rains. Henry leaned forward. So this Rains guy was buying and selling people's lives? Worse, Ramirez said. He was creating digital ghosts, fake deaths, false medical reports, staged obituaries. Once the victim passed away or was declared dead, the insurance payout went straight to one of his offshore accounts. And in my case? Maggie asked quietly. Ramirez hesitated. In your case, he tried to cash in before you were gone. The Phoenix claim was an early withdrawal. Maggie let out a low breath. Then I guess he wasn't patient enough. The agent gestured toward a screen on the wall. A surveillance photo appeared. Victor Rains, mid-50s, sharp suit, the kind of face that smiled only for cameras. This man has been untouchable for years, Ramirez said. But your case gives us leverage. We found your forged files in his system, along with several others labeled priority accounts. He's losing control, and we think he'll try to flee. Henry looked at Maggie. They want you to testify again. She nodded. I'll testify until my voice runs out. Ramirez smiled faintly. You're tougher than most witnesses we get. Maggie met his gaze. That's because I've already died once. Everything now is borrowed time. That night, they were moved to a safe house outside Reno. It was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 flickering porch light, surrounded by quiet desert. Henry took the couch. Maggie slept in a bed that smelled faintly of dust and lavender. But sleep wouldn't come. She got up, sat by the window, and watched the moon hover above the sand like an old coin. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw faces: Ethan's shame, Vanessa's sneer, Rhonda's silence, and now this new man, Rains, who had turned lives into ledgers. She opened her red notebook and wrote, "If death is currency, I'll bankrupt them with the truth." Then she turned off the lamp and whispered to the dark, "Come find me, Victor. I'm not hiding anymore." By dawn, the world answered. An unmarked black sedan pulled into the dirt road leading to the safe house. Henry noticed it first. "That's not one of ours," he said, peering through the blinds. Ramirez, who had spent the night in the adjacent room, came running. "Get down." Before he could finish, the car door opened and a single gunshot cracked through the still morning. The bullet shattered the window, embedding itself in the wall inches above Maggie's chair. "Move!" Henry shouted, pulling her to the floor. Ramirez drew his weapon, radioing for backup. "We're under fire, North Sector, Safe House 3. The car reversed down the road, tires spitting gravel, then disappeared into the horizon. When silence returned, Maggie's heart was pounding. Her teacup lay shattered on the floor beside her. Ramirez knelt beside her. "You all right?" "I'm fine," she said, voice steady, "but I think Victor just RSVP'd to the trial." Hours later, the safe house was swarming with agents. Ramirez's team dusted for prints, examined the bullet trajectory, collected shell casings. Henry hovered beside Maggie. "You should have stayed in the hospital." "I'm exactly where I'm meant to be," she replied. Ramirez approached them. "We traced the car's license plate. It's registered to one of Rain's shell companies. He knows we have his files." "Then he'll run," Henry said. Ramirez nodded. "Unless we catch him first. He has a private jet registered out of Carson City. We're planning to intercept it tonight." He turned to Maggie. "If we can recover his digital servers, it'll clear hundreds of stolen identities, including yours, for good." She nodded. "Then go get them. I'll wait right here." But as night fell, Maggie's condition worsened. Her hands shook, her vision blurred, her chest felt heavy. She refused to tell Henry. Instead, she took out her red notebook and began writing her final testimony, her living will, she called it. It wasn't about money or property, it was about dignity. She wrote to Ethan, "You were my greatest love, and my deepest wound. I forgive you because someone has to start the healing. Don't waste what's left of your name. Make it worth something again." Then she wrote to the others, the invisible women whose identities had been stolen. "They tried to bury us under paperwork, but we are not paper. We are breath and memory and blood that refuse to dry." By the time she finished, her tears had blurred the ink. At 10:47 p.m., Ramirez's voice came through the radio. "We have visual on Rains. He's boarding now. Move in, move in." Henry listened, tense, gripping the table. Maggie sat quietly in the corner, eyes half closed, whispering a prayer she hadn't said since Ethan was a boy. "Hands where we can see them," a voice barked over the radio. "Down on the ground." Then another sound: gunfire. Static. Then silence. "Ramirez?" Henry shouted into the receiver. "Agent Ramirez, report." No answer. Maggie opened her eyes, calm and eerie. "He's not gone," she said softly. "Men like that don't die easy." The next morning, the phone rang. A female agent from Washington spoke, her tone clipped. "Mr. Porter?" "Agent Ramirez was injured in the raid. Rains escaped with the master drive. We believe he's heading toward Las Vegas." Henry's face went pale. "Jesus." Maggie sat upright, every nerve in her body alight. "Then we follow him." "Maggie, you can't." "I'm done being hunted," she said. "Now I hunt." Her voice left no room for argument. They arrived in Las Vegas 2 days later. The city pulsed like a living nerve: neon, greed, and ghosts. Ramirez, recovering from a shoulder wound, met them at the Bureau's temporary command post. "We intercepted one of Rain's associates," he said. He mentioned something called Project Lazarus. It's a digital archive designed to resurrect dead identities whenever the fraud gets discovered. Every time one ghost is buried, another rises. Henry frowned. "So even if we destroy the servers, they'll just start again?" "Unless we expose it publicly," Maggie said. "If they hide in darkness, then we burn the dark." Ramirez looked at her. "That would make you the face of the case, Maggie. You'd be a target again." She smiled faintly. "I've been a target since the day I trusted my son." That evening, in a safe hotel room overlooking the Strip, Maggie recorded her testimony for national release. Cameras, microphones, lights, it all felt surreal. But when the red light blinked on, she spoke like fire wrapped in grace. "They stole my name, my money, and my peace, but they couldn't steal my voice. If you're watching this, remember, silence is the fraudster's first ally. Speak, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "And if Victor Rains is listening, come and collect, if you dare. I'm still alive." When it ended, the room fell silent. Even the crew didn't move. Henry exhaled. "That's going to shake the country." Ramirez nodded. "And flush him out." The night smelled like metal and rain. The neon outside her hotel window flickered Hollis in reflection, as if the city itself was whispering her name. Maggie sat on the edge of the bed, the phone still playing that voice note on repeat. "Let's see how long that heart of yours can keep beating." It wasn't fear she felt anymore. It was recognition. That voice wasn't Victor Rains. It was younger, calmer, almost sorrowful. Henry burst into the room, pale. "We need to move you. Ramirez's team found a tracker in the hallway camera. Someone knows what floor we're on." Maggie nodded, grabbing her red notebook. "Then they know where to find me. Let's not make them wait." Henry stared. "You're not seriously." "I'm done running, Henry," she said softly. "If they want a ghost, I'll show them one that talks back." Within an hour, the FBI relocated her to a secondary site outside Las Vegas, a quiet desert safehouse once used for witness protection. Ramirez met them there, his arm still in a sling but his voice steady. "Victor Rains is cornered," he said. "We traced a financial transfer from one of his dummy corporations. It's a withdrawal large, fast, desperate. He's planning to vanish tonight." "Where?" Henry asked. "Somewhere south. We think he's using an abandoned airstrip near Henderson. We'll intercept him before dawn." Maggie studied the map spread across the table. "How much time?" 4 hours. She folded her hands, eyes sharp. "Then I'm coming with you." Ramirez blinked. "Absolutely not. You're a civilian, and you're ill." "I'm a witness," she corrected, "and the witness belongs where the truth ends." Henry tried to intervene, but one look from her silenced him. Ramirez sijet. "You don't listen, do you?" "Not to men who tell me to stay home," she said, and smiled faintly. By midnight, the desert was a sea of shadows. 3 black SUVs rolled down a dirt road under a moon sharp as glass. Inside the lead car, Maggie sat between Henry and Ramirez, her red notebook clutched tight. The engine hummed low. No one spoke. Finally, Henry broke the silence. "You realize this is madness." "Maybe," Maggie said, "but some truths deserve a front-row seat." Ramirez's radio crackled. "Unit 1 in position. Heat signatures confirmed. 1 target near the hangar." He nodded to his team. "We move on my mark." As the SUVs stopped a few hundred feet away, agents fanned out into the night. The air was electric, filled with that eerie quiet that always comes before a storm. Maggie stayed in the car, watching through the windshield. Then she saw him, Victor Rains, stepping out from the hangar, calm as a man on his morning walk. He looked nothing like the photo. Older, leaner, eyes too bright. And he was smiling. "Hello there, Miss Hollis," his voice echoed across the dark. "You've been difficult to kill." Maggie opened her door and stepped into the sand. Henry grabbed her wrist, but she shook free. "You wanted me alive long enough to collect. Here I am." Victor tilted his head, admiring her composure. "You're a legend now, the woman who wouldn't die. A symbol of resistance. I couldn't have written better publicity myself." "You wrote my death certificate," she said. "That's not publicity, that's cowardice." He laughed softly. "Come now, you and I are the same. We both know the world only values what it can count. I count lives, you count sins. Maggie's gaze hardened. And what do you count when you finally run out of people to steal from? Before he could answer, a spotlight burst from the hangar agents yelling, guns drawn. FBI, hands where we can see them. But Victor didn't move. He simply turned toward Maggie, his voice calm. If they kill me, my servers go live automatically. Every identity, every file, including yours, it'll all vanish into the ether. Ramirez barked an order. Hold fire. He's wired to the system. Victor smiled. Exactly. Kill me, and you erase hundreds of witnesses. Let me go. And maybe I disappear quietly. Maggie stepped forward, ignoring Henry's shout. Then maybe we end this a different way. She reached into her coat and pulled out her notebook. Victor frowned. What's that? My last insurance policy. She flipped it open and read aloud, her voice clear against the desert wind. I, Margaret Hollis, being of sound mind and fading body, leave behind this statement. If anything happens to me, this notebook is to be delivered to every media outlet in the country. Inside are names, addresses, and statements I've gathered since this began. She closed it slowly. You're not the only one who knows how to duplicate a story, Victor. I made copies too. For the first time, his smile faltered. You're bluffing. She handed the notebook to Henry. Then call it. A tense silence followed. Wind hissed through the hangar beams. Ramirez's team advanced, their weapons raised. Victor's hand twitched toward his jacket, but not fast enough. A single gunshot cracked the night. He fell backward, sand exploding beneath him. A flash drive rolled from his hand, glinting under the moonlight. Ramirez shouted, "Hold your fire, secure the device." Henry ran to Maggie's side, breathless. You all right? She nodded faintly. He wasn't the first man to think a woman's silence was worth money. Ramirez retrieved the drive, sealing it in an evidence bag. This ends it. Everything he built dies tonight. Maggie looked out across the desert, her face unreadable. Then maybe I can too. They returned to Los Angeles as the sun broke over the horizon. The world seemed quieter, lighter, like a burden had been lifted. The FBI confirmed that the servers were deactivated. The fraudulent network was dismantled. Maggie's name was finally cleared, and so were hundreds of others. Her video testimony aired again that week, this time closing with the words she'd written in her notebook. Justice isn't loud, it's steady. People across the country shared her story. Letters poured in thousands from daughters, widows, nurses, strangers. They called her a hero. But Maggie didn't feel like one. She felt like a witness of love, betrayal, and the strange mercy that sometimes follows pain. A month later, she sat on her porch in Los Angeles. Henry read the newspaper beside her. The headline said, Elder Fraut ring Liederdies in custody. Confession confirms 412 victims freed. He lowered the paper. You did it, Maggie. She smiled faintly. No, Henry, we did. He looked at her with concern. How's your health? She looked up at the sky, now streaked with gold. Borrowed, like everything else. But I plan to pay it forward. From her purse, she pulled the red notebook, worn, almost falling apart. She handed it to him. This belongs to you now, she said. Keep it safe. Henry frowned. Why me? Because I'm tired of being a story someone else tells. You'll make sure it stays true. He hesitated, then nodded. I promise. That evening, Maggie wrote one last page in a new notebook. If you're reading this, I'm gone. But remember, theft ends when we stop calling silence survival. Speak, even if no one listens. Especially then. She closed the book, placed it on her nightstand, and lay back. Outside, the wind carried the sound of children laughing somewhere down the street. For once, the world didn't feel cruel. It just felt finished. 2 days later, Henry visited to bring her groceries. The front door was unlocked. He called her name. No answer. He found her in the chair by the window, peaceful, her notebook open on her lap. The sunlight fell gently across her face, her eyes closed, her breath gone. On the final page, in shaky handwriting, she'd written, Step 10, End Well. A month after her funeral, Henry appeared on national television beside Agent Ramirez, launching the Hollis Foundation for Truth and Dignity. She taught us that one life can expose an empire, Henry said, holding up the red notebook. This isn't evidence anymore, It's scripture. The audience stood and applauded. But just as the broadcast ended, a producer approached Henry with a pale face. "Sir," she whispered, "there's something strange. A new claim just came through one of the defunct insurance systems." Henry frowned. "A claim?" "Yes," she said, showing him the tablet. "Filed under a new name, Margaret H. Hollis, dated yesterday, and it's active."